Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving headfirst into the biggest detonation at Fairmont Crest. Vanessa misreads the relationship between Dani and Joey after a string of anonymous messages and a conveniently clipped 7-minute camera segment, turning a quiet, off-the-books investigation into a public accusation of betrayal. From a suffocating boardroom to chaotic backstage corridors, a shattered friendship triggers a wave of suspicion about a mole, a leaked press invite, and a hidden third hand pulling the strings. In this video, we'll rewind the timeline to track the clues, break down how the shadow player built the trap through optics, and forecast the darkest scenarios as honor, power, and hearts are pushed to the wall. If you're into deep analysis, razor-sharp logic, and chilling predictions, hit like, subscribe, ring the bell and drop a comment. Whose side are you on, Vanessa, Dani, or Joey? Because the game is only getting started. Welcome back to the channel. Today we turn the camera on a crackling fuse that's been burning for months, the kind you only notice when the room is already filling with smoke. Long before the latest explosion, the tension began with a glossy philanthropic venture that promised to lift everyone's reputation. The foundation became the public face of success. Glossy galas, curated headlines, and bulletproof messaging wrapped the enterprise in a velvet rope that kept questions outside. Inside, however, spreadsheet cells didn't add up. As audits were delayed and contracts renewed with unnerving speed, small inconsistencies shaped a larger silhouette, the kind that hints at someone pulling invisible wires. In that atmosphere, Lauren carried the responsibility of perfection like couture armor, immaculate, imposing, and heavy enough to bruise. Carla, by contrast, chose grit over gloss, quietly tracing financial signatures and file pathways that didn't match the press releases. The dynamic between them had always been complicated. Admiration braided with rivalry, trust seasoned by pride. Their bond could weather gossip and boardroom snubs, but it was untested against weaponized doubt. The pivot point arrived in whispers, not bangs. A charitable initiative expanded into a fast-tracked vendor list, then into an interlocking maze of subcontractors that no one could fully map. Carla and the ally at her side began a clandestine review after hours, tiny lights glowing over code, while the city slept. The goal was simple: confirm a trail of phantom services and pre-approved invoices that ricocheted through shell entities before returning like a boomerang to recognizable pockets. To avoid tipping anyone off, they left no footprints, no emails with subject lines that scream for subpoenas, no memos with sensational phrasing, only a braided string of spreadsheet anomalies and access logs that suggested a cleverly staged siphon. Lauren, meanwhile, juggled donors, optics, and a calendar that never forgave hesitation. She had learned the hard way that power dislikes silence. If you pause too long to explain, someone else tells the story for you. And then the story arrived ready-made, anonymous messages with grainy stills from a security camera, timestamped at a merciless hour, flashing the kind of visual that overrides reason. One image of Carla and her ally in a locked office. One edit where the feed jumped 7 minutes. One insinuation that the late-night collaboration wasn't about spreadsheets but betrayal. The drop was surgical, just before a funding announcement and minutes before a morning news item about whispers of impropriety at the foundation. Lauren did what leaders do when the floor suddenly tilts. She seized the narrative. In a room lined with donors, cameras, and a gallery of brittle smiles, she cracked the surface with a single, targeted question, and the echo made everything else crumble. Carla froze, not out of guilt but out of shock, because the truth they'd been protecting had been flipped into a dagger pointed at both of them. Tamara stepped forward in the only way a matriarch can, softening the edges while refusing to let lies plant permanent roots. Keith moved like a firefighter, straight into the smoke, ordering an internal trace, locking down devices, calling in a forensic sweep of who accessed what and when. Daphne found the breach no one expected, press invitations leaking from a credential that had touched Lauren's workstation days earlier. The implication was devastating. If an outside hand had piggybacked on a familiar device, it meant the saboteur didn't just understand the system, they were intimate with its rhythms. By the time the room emptied, alliances felt like furniture after an earthquake, structurally present but precarious, each piece at a new angle. Carla drew a line with brutal clarity. In the absence of belief, friendship becomes performance, and she refused to perform. The exit looked like control, but it carried the grief of a funeral you weren't allowed to attend. On paper, the next steps were obvious: suspend discretionary approvals, isolate compromised machines, escalate to council, but paper can't measure what rupture does to people. Lauren doubled down on composure, a strategy that succeeds on camera yet corrodes in private. Carla surrendered the last of her illusions and began to pack up the investigation files she could still verify. The ally at her side kept working the money trail, connecting vendor strings to a cluster of limited-use addresses that intersected with a private contractor who had charmed half the city with philanthropic selfies and palatable buzzwords. Tamara tried to host everyone under the same roof for a slow, dignified de-escalation. Instead, the house turned into a pressure cooker. Keith's team flagged the 7-minute blackout as a manual clip, not a system hiccup, with the insertion point timed to erase a key handoff and encrypted thumb drive moving from Carla's pocket to a safe. It didn't matter that the drive carried evidence to protect Lauren's reputation by exposing the real siphon. What the edited footage showed, the world believed. That is the spine of the present crater, an act of protection reframed as betrayal, a good faith investigation torched by a saboteur who understands optics as well as they understand code. The board hates indecision, regulators adore patterns, and donors punish embarrassment. In a single news cycle, doubts calcified into a narrative, 2 insiders, 1 late-night office, a friendship collapsing under the weight of secrecy. But secrecy had never been the point, safety had. Now the people who tried to protect the house are locked outside, and the arsonist has their feet up by the fire, scrolling the headlines they manufactured. This is where part 1 ends, in the smolder, with Lauren holding the crown that suddenly feels like a chain, Carla clutching proof no one wants to see, and a city ready to choose the cleanest version of the mess instead of the truest one. The aftermath rarely arrives as thunder, it comes as a long, cold rain. In the days following the rupture, the charitable venture meets the first wave of formal requests. There will be assurances to donors and carefully scripted statements that claim confidence in internal processes. There will also be letters from oversight bodies, politely phrased but weighted, asking for ledgers, contractor rosters, device logs, and an unbroken chain of approvals for every expedited payment over the past 12 months. Keith, under orders to appear swift and neutral, will quarantine systems and find himself cross-pressured by a board that wants both a pristine narrative and a credible audit. He will deliver neither in the short term, because reality is a tangle. Daphne will uncover that the invitation leak wasn't an accident but a trial balloon, an early probe to map how fast rumors travel and where they coagulate. The saboteur, having tested the bloodstream, moved on to the heart. Lauren will try to stabilize the optics by reshaping the story into a leadership parable. Misjudgments were made, investigations are ongoing, accountability will be thorough. This works for a day, maybe 2. Then a lifestyle outlet publishes a curated timeline that blurs verified steps with speculative innuendo, and the composite sticks because it flatters the audience's appetite for scandal. When donors start calling not to ask what happened but to ask if their names are safe, she will feel something new, fear not for reputation but for institutional survival. Tamara will push for conciliation behind closed doors, urging Lauren to meet Carla without cameras or attorneys, to ask one question that matters: what did you see that I did not? The meeting will almost happen and then collapse under the weight of pride and woundedness. A single person installing a table between them will mark the exact second the friendship becomes a negotiation. Carla, meanwhile, will be cornered by the elegance of a trap that robbed her of context. She possesses evidence, but the 7-minute amputation turns sequence into suspicion. Without the full reel, motive gets rewritten. In desperation cloaked as discipline, she will draft a report meant for legal eyes only, a crude map of entities and payments, an annotated list of false front companies, a footnoted chain leading to a name that has been smiling from billboards for months. This report will leak, of course it will, because nothing built in crisis stays contained. The leak will not clear her, instead, it will be framed as retaliatory. The city will watch 2 former allies drowning and argue about who kicked first, rather than who removed the lifeline. The saboteur will continue to move gracefully, shifting funds before anyone notices, seeding new rumors, laundering attention through influencers who crave proximity to power more than they crave accuracy. Here is the forecast you asked for, the one that drags everyone into the coldest version of the future. The board will form a special committee that looks independent but sits too close to vested interests. Donor outreach will be pushed to a boutique firm, which will leak select assurances to a favored columnist, and those assurances will boomerang as skepticism. Regulators will signal interest in a formal inquiry. The ally beside Carla will be threatened with a breach of trust claim, forcing a tactical retreat that looks like guilt. Lauren will be left to defend an institution while suspecting she herself has been used as a delivery system for the saboteur's narrative. Sleep will become a rumor in her home. Food will taste like paper. She will stop trusting the sound her phone makes when it lights up. Each apology she refuses to give will feel like strength on the outside and erosion on the inside. The loneliness of leadership will stop being an aphorism and start being a room she cannot leave. Keith will find the needle, the tampered segment, buried where tamperers always hide their work, in a place no one checks because it's too obvious. He will trace the edit to a device that once borrowed credentials on Lauren's network during a rushed prep for a photo op. To go public with this is to admit catastrophe, to bury it is to become complicit. He will choose disclosure and be punished for the honesty with a vote of restructuring. Daphne will push a parallel track with outside counsel, arguing that the only path through is full transparency and temporary shutdown of the glamour projects that made the headlines. Her counsel will be labeled disruptive. In the interim, the saboteur will close the loop, rolling the siphoned funds into a civic showcase that looks unimpeachable. By the time anyone sees the shell game, the shells will be different colors and stacked in a new pattern. The prize won't be money anymore, it will be belief, which is worth more. And Carla? She will walk into a press environment designed to shred her. The narrative will present two choices: admit impropriety she did not commit, or be cast as a rogue operator who damaged a beloved institution out of envy. Both choices end with exile. She will choose neither and be handed exile anyway. The final image of this arc, because every arc builds toward an image, is not a courtroom or a confession, but a door that closes with collaborative finality. It is the door of a boardroom where decisions are packaged, the door of a newsroom where nuance is recycled into clicks, the door of a private office where a philanthropist smiles for a camera while a hard drive is wiped 3 floors below. Tomorrow we'll watch a family enterprise fracture into cliques and conclaves, and the line she will repeat in private, never out loud, is that the institution is being saved at the cost of the people who made it worth saving. There is, in theory, a rescue path, a coordinated release of the restored footage, a joint statement that names the saboteur, a donor summit that funds the cleanup rather than the optics. But the timing will be missed, and timing is everything. By the time the 7 minutes are found and authenticated, the audience will have moved to a new scandal. The restored truth will feel like yesterday's weather, technically correct and emotionally irrelevant. Lauren will hold the proof in her hand and understand that victory without belief is just paperwork. She will apologize into a silence she earned and was engineered to endure, and no one will know which part hurt more. Carla will consider returning for one final on-the-record interview and will decide against it, because the question was never whether she could speak, it was whether anyone would listen for long enough to hear. The saboteur will attend a ribbon cutting for a bright new project and shake hands with officials who swear they are allergic to scandal. If you came here for a neat redemption, you won't find it in this forecast. What you will find is the truth no one enjoys saying out loud, that sometimes the most precise prediction is the bleak one. The collapse of trust doesn't end with a bang or an arrest, it ends with people learning to live inside smaller rooms. Lauren will master the art of surviving applause she no longer believes. Carla will perfect the discipline of working without the phone numbers she used to dial at midnight. Keith will join a firm that values integrity but lacks proximity to power. Daphne will become the person people call when they're ready to choose transparency first, not last. And tomorrow will guard a fire that seems, at times, too small to warm anyone, but she will guard it anyway, because that is what the last adult in the room does when the storm refuses to pass. And that is the dark panorama settling over Fairmont Crest. When a friendship is shattered by evidence so artfully staged, the fallout isn't just broken feelings, it's a domino collapse into honor, money, and power. Vanessa walks out of the hall wearing a mask of composure while a storm of doubt rages inside. Dani closes every bridge of communication to protect herself, accepting the bullseye of speculation. Joey moves like someone with a fresh burn, furious and helpless as truth is twisted by an anonymous hand that knows the system better than the insiders do. Tamara tries to keep the flame of unity alive, but the gale of rumor is too strong. Keith locks down data gates without realizing the puppeteer is already one step ahead. Daphne traces the leaked press invite and stumbles into a chilling maze of connections, and Keith, armed with a report that the 7 minutes were cut on purpose, faces a bitter choice: speak and trigger open war, or stay silent and become an accomplice to a perfect performance. From this moment on, every gesture carries a price. A glance is read as an admission, a pause is branded as guilt, a press release delayed by hours becomes proof that something is being hidden. And as social audiences pivot from empathy to judgment, as donors ask, "Is my name safe?" instead of "What is the truth?" the battle moves out of the boardroom and into the public mind. In our next video, we'll go deeper into 3 suspect branches behind the manipulation: the player who understands internal security protocols, the one who controls the flow of grant money, and the architect of optics who can turn truth into a story engineered for clicks. We'll also rebuild a precise timeline before, during, after the 7 fateful minutes to see exactly what was deliberately erased from collective memory. If you found today's analysis useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the follow-up, and tell us in the comments, who do you suspect is the third hand? Hashtag Team Vanessa, hashtag Team Dani, hashtag Team Joey, or hashtag Shadow Player? Because at Fairmont Crest, night is only beginning, and the truth won't speak for itself unless we chase it to the very end.